That summer, we rented a small wooden boat and learned to read the water as if it were a book. I was 10, and the world felt larger than the pocket of air I wore around me. A kind of hole you could fall into if you forgot to watch your step. The lake breathed in slow circles, blue-grey and patient, as if it had all the time in the world to watch us learn how to be human in it. The hotel we stayed in was a tired thing with peeling white paint and a porch that rattled when the wind came through the pines. We called it a holiday, though it wore the title lightly, as if holidays were meant for the mouth to smile and the hands to forget their usual work. My father, stern in manner only when it mattered, drove the car with a soft, careful foot that never pressed too hard on the gas or the brakes. My mother wore a dress of pale blue that caught the sun and turned it into small, bright stories at the hem. My sister, Lucy, who was 2 years older and had a knack for making even the mundane feel like a small ceremony, carried the sense of grand adventure in every step she took. The boat, an old thing with benches smeared by salt and thyme, sat at the pier as if it had waited forever for us. It squeaked a little when we pushed it into the water, and the sound was the first song of the day I remember. The lake did not hurry. It held us in its glassy mouth and let us breathe in the quiet that follows a long, loud life somewhere else. The boat would rock gently, and the smell of wet wood climbed into the air, the resin and damp bark mixing with the smoke from breakfast fires on shore and the faintest hint of river grass and alga against the underside of the hull. Grandfather soft-spoken, with hands always smelling faintly of tea and tar. He spoke little, but when he did, it felt like weather moving through a window, clearing a space in the air for something to appear. He told me to watch how the line gathered its own weight, to listen to the water when I pulled, to feel not only the tug of the fish, but the rebellion of my own fear give way to patience. He showed me where the boat's nose would point on the current, how to steer with the rhythm of the lake rather than the force of the wind. The first time I stood at the stern, the oar in my hands unsteady as a new word you fear to pronounce, my breath fogging in the cool morning air, I felt the world loosening its grip on me. The oar dipped, then rose, and the boat slid into that quiet distance where shore becomes thread and thread becomes memory. The sun came up in a slow, shy way, painting the lake with a pale peach colour that made the water look like a sleeping animal, a creature of gleaming fur and soft snorts. The boat hummed with the movement of the water against its hull, and the line slid from my fingers with a sigh, as though the lake itself exhaled at the sight of a boy learning to hold on to something that could break and still stay true. We found our favourite spot a little way from the pier, a bend where the cattails grew tall, and the wind kept its hands in its own pockets. There, the water was shallow enough to see the bottom, and the sunlight stitched the stones in a way that made them look like coins laid out for a child's treasure hunt. I watched minnows dart along the edge of the boat and imagined they were tiny chandeliers, each moment of motion a small lit path in a dark room. The world felt trimmed and precise in those hours, as if someone had cut away all the clutter until only the essential things remained. The feel of wood under my palms, the sting of sun on my cheeks, the scent of lime green leaves on the warm breeze. Mother cooked by the shore on a little stove set on bricks, the plate clinking with reassurance and her laughter drifting across the water like a flag in a gentle wind. We ate bread still warm from the oven and thyme-scented butter that tasted like sunshine and the days ahead. The air held it all, the sounds of a few distant boats, the soft rask of a line over the reel, Lucy's voice in a heated debate with a crab she'd found, which she then released with a theatrical bow that would become a family joke for years afterward. In those hours, the world seemed to tilt toward kindness, as if the lake had a soft hand with us, guiding us away from the fear that every boy carries of growing too old too soon. I learned to listen to more than the water that day. I learned how to listen to my own body when it spoke in a way that frightened me at other times. A tremor in the hands when a sudden splash startled me. The way my heart beat against the ribs as if it were trying to escape through a door that had no hinge. There were moments when I would lean against the boat's edge and feel the coolness of the wooden planks against my forehead, and a sudden sense that the world would be kinder if I did not rush it. Grandfather's quiet nods gave me a language without words, the language of taking small steps forward, of staying, of letting myself be taught by the patient patience of an old lake and an older man who seemed to know that the best way to live was to let things unfold slowly. Evenings came with a particular tenderness. The shore turned into a soft borderland of light and shadow. The water reflected the amber glow of the street lamps behind the cottages, as if it carried a second, gentler sun within it. The heat began to recede from skin, leaving a comfortable ache that made sleep easier. We would walk along the road that curled away from the lake, the air tasting of vanilla and pine, and the earth under our feet seemed to exhale. On the last evening, Grandfather took the boat out with me aboard, leaving my parents on shore to watch from the dock as the boat glided away into the center of the lake. The world grew very small and very large at once, the smallness of our narrow boats moving through a vast open blue, the largeness of the memory that would one day fill the space where my heart now held all the things that mattered. He spoke softly about the water's memory, that if you paid attention, the lake would store the sound of your breath, the weight of your hands, the quiet vow you made to yourself to hold steady when the wind changed and fear pressed in. He did not say more than that, and perhaps that was enough. The boat slowed to a near stop, and we listened to the lake's breath as the light slid away, leaving behind a pale string of stars and an orange crescent of sunset over the far bank. We slept in the boat that night, under a blanket of open sky. The smell of damp wood and salt in the air, and the soft beating of a distant thunderstorm far away on the horizon. In the lull between sleep and wakefulness, I felt the tug of something larger than me, an invitation to belong to something that would outlast my fear, to become someone who could carry the memory of a small boat and the quiet wisdom of a man who did not teach by sermon, but by steady presence. The memory settled in me then like a pearl in a shell, not fashy, not loud, but luminous in the way it refracted the light of a life still to be lived. When we returned to our home later that autumn, the house seemed both smaller and more intimate than it had before. My sister and I kept the lake within our voices. We would tell stories of the day's catch, the pretend fights, the pretend cheers, as if those moments were currency we could spend during the long, ordinary months that followed. My father kept his car in its usual place, but I began to notice how his hands, which had always been strong and certain, sometimes trembled a little when he spoke of what lay ahead in the world beyond our front door. My mother began to bake bread with a slightly different rhythm, as if the memory of the lake had taught her to slow down even when the world demanded speed. Lucy grew taller, which meant our playful roughhousing had to make way for a little gentler language, a little more listening, a little less of the loud, fearless bravado that had marked our childhood games. Time moved, as it does, through our days with a patient insistence. The summer wore away into ordinary seasons, and the lake receded into memory's quiet distance, still present, but not always visible. Yet the memory did not fade. It deepened, becoming a compass of sorts for the storms that would follow in later years. The days of doubt in a crowded room. The nights when a phone call might break a person's heart. The days when the news of the world seemed to come at us with a speed that endangered the very breath we used to claim as our own. In those storms I would recall the boat's creak, the line's soft whisper, the way the water held us without question. And I would remember that learning to listen was not just a skill for fishing or travel, but a way of living, a way of making a home inside a moment, so that when the moment passed, the home would stay. Now I am old enough to understand the power of a single ordinary day, when the world is generous enough to slow down for a moment and let your soul put down roots. The lake in my memory does not glimmer with the riot of youth, but with a more tempered, sustaining light. The light that comes from knowing you were seen,